Welcome. We are back here from the SEC Focus podcast page. We're live on my personal Facebook page. We're live in a few different places, but if you're listening, we appreciate you. We hope you had a very Merry Christmas. And today, what we're going to talk about is SEC basketball. So before we get back into the thick of the bowl games, before we get back into the thick of the college football playoffs, before we break down the Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, TCU matchups, we're going to SEC play starts Wednesday, interconference for most schools, and we just wanted to come on here and we're going to break down some power rankings, right? This is the power rankings as I see them. Now, this is what we've seen so far this season. This is not where I think they'll end up necessarily. This is what we've seen so far based on opponents, strength of schedule, wins, losses, the whole nine. So without further ado, we're going to break down the power rankings, and then we're going to go into the AP rankings that were just released moments ago. Breaking news here on SEC Focus Podcast. So power rankings, as I see them right now, went back and forth on number one. I think that for Arkansas, I got them at number one. They have one loss. To Creighton, who actually has gone on an absolute slide, has not played well since then. But I went back and forth between Arkansas, Tennessee, and Alabama. That's kind of the group of three that I saw at the top. I think that I just gave Arkansas the nod at number one with the one loss. Tennessee and Alabama both having two. But it's going to break down like this. Arkansas at number one, Tennessee at number two. Tennessee did lose a game this week to Arizona, hostile crowd. Didn't hold that a lot against them. I think that they played pretty well, close loss. But with them, I think that what you saw is a close road loss meant a little bit more to me than winning against a lower level opponent like we're going to talk about here in a minute. So Arkansas at number one, Tennessee at number two, Alabama at number three. Also a team that did take a loss. They have two losses on the season, but they also have they've beaten two number one teams at the time. Now, is North Carolina still at the top of that? Are they a worthy number one ranking? No, probably not. But the Houston win at Houston, very quality win. Maybe next to Tennessee beating Kansas could be the best SEC win we've seen so far. And then we kind of get into the next tier. I talked about it before when we broke down the rankings. I talked about Arkansas, Tennessee, and Alabama kind of being that top tier in the SEC, in my opinion, right now. We go to 4 is Kentucky. I think that three losses, and a lot of talk has been made about Kentucky and having the three losses, and is Cal's time running out and all that. I think that's a little bit overplayed because I think if you look back, it's a reactionary take because every year we see Cal's teams kind of do this. He front loads the schedule with some tough opponents, loses some close games, but in almost every scenario over the course of years, Calipari's teams get better as the season goes on. What we know is that this team has the reigning Wooden Award winner. What we know is that this team is stacked full of talent. So do they need to improve some things? Do they need to adjust the rotation? I think that's true. Cal's talked about that, but Cal's not going to put the emphasis on the front of the regular season. He's just not going to do that. He's been doing this long enough, and I think that they'll be fine. So again, I'm Arkansas number one, Tennessee number two, Alabama number three, Kentucky number four, Missouri at number five. Now, there could be an argument made that Missouri could have been over Kentucky. They do have, a couple losses, but I think that they have a really good win over Illinois. They also have a blowout loss against Kansas. Missouri, to me, has been an impressive team. Being able to show what they did against Illinois was big, and they have a humongous test coming up that we'll talk about here shortly. At number 6, I went with Mississippi State. Coming off of a bad loss, but I think they front-loaded the schedule on purpose to stack up some wins, obviously with just the one loss. Same can be said with number 7, LSU. They have front-loaded the first part of their season with wins, not quality wins, just wins, but just with one loss. Auburn at number 8. I don't necessarily think that Auburn has any bad losses. I just don't think that they're very good. And what I talked about when the season first started was that their front court play was going to be fine, but the backcourt was where I worried, and I think that's panned out about right so far. I got Ole Miss at number 9, also coming off of a bad loss. I think that the seat for Kermit is getting hotter by the day in Oxford, and they have a tough test coming up Wednesday as Tennessee rolls into town. Georgia at 10, A&M at number 11, Florida at 12, which I think a new coach, new system, but still a lot of talent there. I think thus far into the season, Florida has been a disappointment. I do think that they'll probably get a little bit better, but they got a lot to prove down in Gainesville. I think that obviously first year, they're not going to fire him the first year, but I think at 7-5, that's certainly not where they thought they would be. And then 13 and 14, probably a toss up. I think that South Carolina and Vanderbilt, I got them South Carolina 13, Vanderbilt 14. I think both have been disappointing. I think the difference being, and the reason I have Vanderbilt at 14 is because of some expectation there that, they had a pretty good run, went into the NIT, made a decent run, that they would improve this season. Stackhouse got an extension, got a raise, all these things. And I just don't think it's panned out. I think the in-game coaching decisions, as well as the optics of him getting kicked out of the game, getting escorted off the court by security, I think it's just a bad look all in all for Vanderbilt and Jerry Stackhouse in particular. So that's kind of the order. Just to recap: Arkansas, number 1, Tennessee, number 2, Alabama, number 3, Kentucky, number 4, Missouri, number 5, Mississippi State at number 6, number 7, LSU, number 8, Auburn, number 9, Ole Miss, number 10, Georgia, number 11, A&M, number 12, Florida, number 13, South Carolina, and number 14, Vanderbilt. Let's get into some comments here. Let's see here. Kentucky has got to make a big statement win against Missouri. Absolutely. Absolutely agree. And then we have, yes, they do. Worried about the fight my Cats got. I think they got a lot of fight. Alabama and Tennessee both have better resumes than Arkansas. I don't think Arkansas even has a quality win, to be honest. I don't disagree with that. I think that Alabama and Tennessee both do have better quality wins than Arkansas, and that's why I kind of had them, the 3 in that category by themselves, and I really just gave Arkansas the nod based on the 1 loss. I think that you could swap those up, and arguably there would be a case for all 3 to be at number 1. But let's get into some more of these comments. It's say Alabama. Bill Sizemore says Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas for me. Yeah, absolutely. I don't disagree. Let's see. Chloe says overplayed for sure. Look back on the 2020 team. They clicked right during the turning time and didn't get to show their full potential due to COVID. I agree. Obviously, I'm a Tennessee fan, so I don't root for Kentucky, so I have no reason to say that Calipari deserves the benefit of the doubt. But I think that when you look at just the history, the numbers show us that team gets better as the season goes on. We saw it when he was the coach at UMass. We saw it when he was the coach at Memphis. We've seen it since he's been the coach at Kentucky. So I think that hold tight, Kentucky fans. Now, what we do know is that Kentucky basketball is similar to Alabama football. The expectation is to compete for a national championship every year. And when you have the talent that Coach Cal has had and you've had the letdowns that they've had, I think the patience starts to wear thin. Of course, then you had the off-the-field stuff this past season with him going at Stoops and Stoops going at him on who makes more money and who's getting this and who's getting that. I just think some things, not that the welcome has been worn out and Cal should not be fired. That's a ridiculous take. But I think that more pressure is on him now than he's probably felt since he's been at Kentucky. The Cats will be okay. Shooters have been missing shots. They'll get it figured out. I don't disagree there. And one thing that when I go back and I look at KenPom a lot for the statistical breakdowns, and I think that when you see Kentucky in the top 25 in both offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency, it bears out exactly what I'm saying and exactly what they've been over the past 10 years since Cal's been there. It's that they will get better and the shots just aren't falling, right? They're being efficient. I think he does need to tweak the rotation a little bit, needs to get that set. But again, I think he will. Kentucky has got to hit free throws, both guards at 57% combined. Matt, that's a great point. Matt Short brings that up, but I think that that's just who Kentucky is. They really don't have, they historically, look, Calipari coach teams, if one thing you can knock, it is that they don't shoot free throws very well. We saw Memphis lose a national championship based on not being able to hit free throws. We saw him lose a Conference USA, I think at the time, championship on not being able to hit free throws. I think that that's a good point that you bring up, though. Bill Sizemore comes to us and says, most Kentucky fans are frustrated with Cal because of his lack of accountability. He always blames the ref, yeah, et cetera. This year he's blaming us, the fans, saying we are making it so hard on the players to play here. Yeah, I don't think that that's new for Cal. Unfortunately, I think that he is known for doing that. He's going to use the media to get his messaging out there. And I think a lot of times what he's doing, and because I've actually heard him say this sometimes, is sometimes I feel like he's trying to take the heat off of his players by putting it on himself, because he understands that making the money he makes and being at the position that he's in, that if he takes the pressure, then it comes off the players. I think that that's misguided, but that is what it is. So I want to break down some of this. I mentioned KenPom earlier, so I wanted to go to KenPom, and I'm just looking at the predictions once SEC starts playing. Now, this is just SEC scheduling, like their record against other SEC opponents and how he has them. And I think that it was a little surprising to me on how KenPom has it shaken out according to the numbers. So KenPom has Tennessee at number 1, finishing at 14-4 in the SEC. He has Arkansas at number 2 in the SEC, finishing 12-6. He has Kentucky at actually tied for number 3, but third at 12-6 as well. Alabama also at 12-6 at 4. Then he has Auburn 11-7, Mississippi State 10-8, Missouri at 9-9, Florida at 9-9, A&M 7-11. Ole Miss 8-10, LSU 6-12, Georgia 6-12, Vanderbilt 5-13, and then South Carolina finishing last with only 4 wins. So I think that that's been on there for a couple weeks, and I think that there could be some change there. I don't think that going into the season when we did our preseason rankings, me and Chris both had Mississippi State a little bit higher than some other outlets did, but I think that they have to prove themselves as well. They have to prove that they can win against quality opponents. And we haven't seen that. We have seen Missouri do that now that they have a win over Illinois. Can they keep that going as they have a big game coming up? And that's kind of what I wanted to go into. We have some really SEC conference play starting this week and some huge matchups just right off the top. You got Alabama at Mississippi State. So we know how talented Alabama is. We've seen them lose a couple games. However, there's no doubt of the talent they have and the potential that they have, especially with the freshman phenom in Brandon Miller. But a lot has been said about Mississippi State. I mentioned it when we started the program about how they've been stacking wins and what Chris Jans is trying to do there. So I think that this is a game that Mississippi State probably needs more than Alabama, but it's a big game for both because I think it sets the tone for what we're going to see starting SEC play. And if Alabama is going to compete for the SEC regular season, championship, they're going to have to win games just like this. Another game of note that may even be bigger is that you have Kentucky at Missouri. Now, we've seen Missouri already host 2, highly ranked opponents in Kansas and Illinois. And we saw some, sellout crowds against Kansas. And I think that they are already announcing a sellout. And I think that when Kentucky, even if they're down, that's still going to draw the attention. It's still going to get you a sellout crowd. And I think the place will be rocking. The bigger thing for me, and this is for both sides, Missouri has a quality win. And when you really look at it, does Kentucky have a quality win? They don't have any quad 1 wins, according to KenPom, but they have a couple of decent ones. Can Kentucky beat a quality team on the road? Now, people always look at Calipari coach teams and they think that they're just youth and it's one and dones. That's not what this team is. They have the reigning Wooden Player of the Year in Shewa. They have some seniors on that team. They have some really good contributors that are not freshmen, that are not one and done. And those have typically been the teams that Cal has made deep runs with and even won a title with. So now is when you get to start that. All right, we have 3 wins coming into conference play, but here's when the real season starts. Here's when we can set the tone on the road against a team that just came off of a huge win against Illinois. Another game of note also tomorrow is the LSU hosting Arkansas. So, again, similar to Mississippi State, LSU has been stacking wins against lower-level opponents. So, Arkansas has the one bad loss against Creighton. However, I think that Arkansas has the talent. Obviously, they lose a big piece to an ACL injury, but their talent is crazy. What Musselman has been able to do, and I don't know if it's talked about enough, is that the back-to-back Elite Eights, bringing in this class that he did that only finished, I think he finished 3rd, not just in high school recruiting, but also in the transfer portal as well, bringing in the guys that average double-digit points, that are, senior leaders, juniors, guys that have been there, done that, aren't coming in to disrupt it. The culture seems really good. They all seem to really get along. So what Musselman has done is not only bringing the talent, but thus far he's been able to find a way to get those guys to play together and to play hard. One of the things that really stands out to me when we look at the order of these teams, even in the AP poll, which we'll just talk about in a second, when you talk about the teams like the Arkansas, the Alabamas, the Tennessees, the Kentuckys, that these teams are elite defensively. When you look at KenPom, all 4 of those teams rank in the top 20, top 25, excuse me, in defensive efficiency. So that's going to be the theme. I think that Tennessee is the highest ranked of those, my worries for Tennessee are not on the defensive side of the ball. It's the offensive side of the ball and where they're going to get that production from. And speaking of Tennessee, they actually open up on the road as well at Ole Miss. Kind of talked about, Kermit's seat. Is it getting hot? And I think that last year dealt with a lot of injuries. They actually have some talent there. They seem to be healthy for the first time, and it's still not bearing the results. But I think this is obviously an opportunity that you're going to have a home game against a top 10 team coming in Tennessee, where you can right the ship, right? I mean, Ole Miss is coming off a really bad loss against North Alabama. North Alabama, for those that don't know, according to KenPom, that's the 287th ranked team in the country. So that's an inexcusable loss. And those are the kinds of losses that get you your job lost. I mean, there's just no other way around it. I think that for Tennessee, setting the tone, hopefully getting back Josiah Jordan-James, and, really just starting the SEC play off with a bang is really what they're looking for. Let's see. Chris says, Vanderbilt and SC at the bottom. All I need to know, fire Jerry Stackhouse. Absolutely. The Drake loss for MSU is a big black eye. I agree. I think that there's been some black eyes, but I think with Mississippi State, a chance to really correct some wrongs with this upcoming schedule. But rolling into the AP poll that was just released, as I'm counting it, not really great at math, but I count 5 SEC teams in the top 25, 3 in the top 10, and let's just go over those real quick. We're going to kind of skim through. These aren't all SEC teams. This is just the top 25. You got Purdue at 1, UConn at 2, Houston at 3, Kansas at 4, Arizona at 5, Texas at 6, Tennessee at 7, Alabama at 8, Arkansas at 9, Gonzaga 10, UCLA 11, 12 is Baylor, 13 Virginia, 14 Miami, 15 is Wisconsin, 16 is Indiana, 17 is Duke, 18 is TCU, 19 is Kentucky, 20 is Auburn. I did miss one. There's 6 of them. Mississippi State is 21, 22 is Xavier, 23 is New Mexico, 24 is West Virginia, and 25 is North Carolina. So a couple of things that stand out to me in there are that when you look at the losses, right, and this is why I went back and forth with Tennessee being at the top. So Tennessee has 2 losses. Both of those losses, Colorado, not a very good team, but the other loss they had was against Arizona, who is a top 5 team. One of their wins was against the number 4 ranked team in Arizona. So you look at Alabama, kind of the same thing applies. They end up beating Houston on the road, and Houston's ranked 3rd. They were number 1 at the time. Arkansas just doesn't have that same quality win. Still, I think they're a really quality team, and they'll be there at the end. And you look it down at some of Kentucky really doesn't have bad losses per se. I mean, you got a loss to Gonzaga. I mean, I think Gonzaga's a really good team. They're a top 10 team, but that's kind of where we shake out. So 6 teams in the top 25 for them. So also what also came out today, probably way too early, is bracketology on ESPN. So I'm just looking around, and I just want to highlight some things before we wrap this thing up for today. Right now, the way that it sits is they have the Big 12 getting 9 teams in, the Big 10 getting 9 teams in. They have the SEC getting 6 teams in, ACC getting 5, the Big East getting 5, the Pac-12 getting 4, Mountain West getting 3, West Coast Conference getting 2, and the American getting 2. So some highlights of that. Chris says Vandy won't even get an invite to the CBI. That's probably true. Probably true. So in the Louisville region, which is the South region, they have Purdue at the 1 seed. I'm not going to go over every single one of these because that would take a long time. But some notes are that for the SEC is that Tennessee is right now is the 2 seed in that region. They would be taking on Furman as the 2-15 matchup. Obviously, we never really pay a lot of attention to the 2-15 until recently when we actually saw a 15 seed win. So let's go down to the West, and you have Arizona as the 1 seed. And in that same side of the bracket from the SEC, they have Arkansas as the as a 4 seed taking on the 13 seed St. Louis. I think that St. Louis has actually proven they're a pretty quality opponent. They got them predicted to win their conference, the team that had played pretty well. Also from the SEC in the same one as Mississippi State as the 6 seed taking on Charleston as the 11 seed. So let's see here. On the Midwest, which would be the Kansas City, you have Kansas as the 1 seed, and then rolling down, you have Kentucky as the 5 seed in that same one. You have some notable things. North Carolina as the 6th seed, Gonzaga as the 3 seed, Alabama actually as the 2 seed in that same one. Chris, I agree. Arkansas at 4 does seem low to me. I don't really understand that, but that's what they have so far. And then in the New York region, you have UConn as the 1 seed. Nobody's surprised by that. And at the 8 seed, and this would be a really good first round matchup, the 8-9 seed, which we always see, it's a 50-50 game designed that way, right? It would be Auburn taking on Michigan State and Tom Izzo. I think that seeing Bruce Pearl and Tom Izzo on the sidelines would be classic, and somebody might have a heart attack on the sidelines. I think that's it for the SEC teams in there. So 6 teams getting in from the SEC so far right now. I think that's about right. I think that you could see a 7th team get in, could possibly be LSU if they can find enough wins. The play-in, they got last teams in. They still got Creighton in. I don't know if I see that happening. The next 4 out, they actually have LSU on that next 4 outline, so I don't think it would be too difficult to get them as one of the last 4 in if they can find it. If they could win 10 games in the SEC, which it's a tall task, right? The SEC is, I'm not going to say that they're the toughest college basketball conference, but I do think that they're deep in talent, deep in, coaches, and it's going to be really tough, really tough. So let's see. Chris says Bama over Gonzaga after Gonzaga beat them. Interesting. Can Bama sustain their early hot start? I've mentioned it before. We've seen them hot a lot and taper off. Be fun to watch. Yeah, we did. So you have mentioned that. Went back over some numbers. I think that's been true sometimes and a little bit overstated. And I think that last year dealing with so many injuries, that was really tough. I think that this is by far Nate Oates' most talented team. He's never had a freshman like Brandon Miller. I mentioned it when the season started that I thought Brandon Miller was going to be the best freshman in the SEC. And not only has that so far been true, he might be the best freshman in the country. There's no other freshman in the top 100 in scoring. The guy is the complete package. He can shoot. He can finish at the rim. He can rebound. He can defend. I mean, the guy is the total package. And I think that a lot of people brought up the Arkansas freshmen who are extremely talented. And I think that there's a couple reasons why Brandon Miller is more highlighted. For one, Arkansas is more, they're dispersing a lot of the ball a lot more. They're asking a lot from a lot of people. I think that Alabama needs Brandon Miller to be great as they need him to be great to get these wins. I think that what you did see from Alabama, though, is that in the Houston game, Brandon Miller was not good, and they were still able to come back and get that win. So that's a huge sign for them as some guys coming back. Quinterly coming back off of the ACL surgery, seems to be getting his footing down, hit a huge shot against North Carolina, played pretty well in the Houston game. So again, I think that just going back over, I think it's going to be a great SEC basketball season. I think that a lot of teams have not shown us a whole lot just yet, but I think that we'll get to see that as well. And if KenPom, if his predictions bear out with Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Alabama, and Auburn as the top 5, that's about in line with the way that I had them going into the season. I would swap around some things. I actually have Alabama a little higher than Kentucky, but we shall see. So anyways, just wanted to get on here the day after Christmas and talk about SEC basketball before we get in to the SEC bowl games again, which should be Wednesday. Might have to switch that around because I actually have a little side hustle where I am over a lot of things at the Liberty Bowl game. That's also Wednesday. It's a 4:30 kick. So making it at 7 o'clock is going to be tough. So we might move that around, but we will have all of your college bowl, college football breakdowns, predictions, all that. We're going to talk Georgia, Ohio State. We're going to talk Michigan, TCU, winners, losers, all that. Big stars. We're going to try to break that down. But for today, we just wanted to focus on basketball as SEC conference play again starts Wednesday. A lot of action on deck, some huge games, huge matchups coming up. And I think that we're going to learn a lot more about who's who in the SEC over the next couple of weeks and into the end of January. So for the SEC Focus Facebook group, for the SEC Focus podcast page, I'm SEC Jeezy. I'm out.